Sober Witch, and welcome back to the Sober Witch Life. We've got another episode this week, and today's topic is I don't know, maybe a little bit spicy in some ways. Well, it should be. It was inspired by this past week's Witchul Hour. For those of you that don't know, not only do I record a podcast, but I do record a weekly radio show as well, where I get to include music in a whole ritualized component every single week. So it's really lovely. You should always check out soberwitch.life if you want to take a listen. But as far as today's show and episode on the podcast, it was kind of inspired. Last week's episode was all around like Valentine's Day and self love. And, I started really thinking a lot about desire, right? And so I'm going to say something, maybe even a couple of things here today that might make people uncomfortable. For those of us that are spiritually wired, right? I believe that addiction is often born from shame desire. Not from wanting too much, but from being taught that wanting or desiring things, especially things for ourselves, is dangerous. And in recovery spaces early on, we're taught to be careful about any of our wanting. And I understand why this is. Your nervous system is often going to be dysregulated, and you've trained your body, potentially for decades, if you're anything like me, to reach for relief in a really destructive way, right? So you can't literally trust the urges that move through your body, right? And when we're in early recovery, it requires structure. It requires us to be, humble. It requires us to learn how to stabilize our lives before we expand it. But I want to talk about this difference that I've really been exploring over the course of the past week. And that is there is a difference between impulse and compulsion, right? And longing and desire. And for those of us that are spiritually wired, who have grand visions, who are magically inclined, who, know that there is something else that is kind of out there greater than us, pulling us forward, it what I'm talking about today really matters. The difference between this compulsion and this longing, this impulse and this desire really, really matters. So I was thinking, and this past week, my partner, myself, and his son, we watched an old movie, 30 years old, which is wild to me to think, called Seven. Um, if you're a Brad Pitt fan, you've definitely seen it. If you're a Morgan Freeman fan, you've probably seen it. Uh, but I was raised Catholic, right? And just like this movie starts to explore, we were taught about the seven deadly sins. And I was thinking about this, how they're all kind of aligned around desire, right? Envy, lust, gluttony, greed, pride, wrath, sloth, all of these things, right? Envy, is wanting something that is not yours, desiring something that isn't yours. Lust is this desire of, pleasure, physical pleasure. Gluttony is wanting, more of a good thing, desiring more of a good thing. Greed, um, even like wrath, which is like, I was doing some research, is can be defined as the wanting or the deep desire of justice, and then sloth, just the desire to rest, right? And don't get me wrong, I understand that they are talking about these in the context, when they talk about it as being of a sin, as being all encompassing, right? Kind of consuming one's life. Again, probably leaning more towards the compulsion. And so I've this Catholic background, so I have this just kind of like built-in layer of maybe feeling that desire is wrong. And then I step into recovery and the language changed, but the undertone was felt similar. And I was as I was getting ready to, write about this today and talk about this, I was thinking about this, right? It's not the same, but it feels similar, right? So you're told to like be careful of your self-will, right? You've got to turn it over to your higher power. You're told to check your ego, stay humble one day at a time, right? Don't worry about tomorrow or what you might want tomorrow, right? All that matters is today. And I'm not dismissing this at all. Um, Structure saves lives. 12-step programs and working a program saves lives. And I do believe that often early in recovery, containment is necessary. Like we need these structures in order to like begin the healing process. But what happens when the individual that's sitting in the meeting isn't just trying to stop drinking, but they're being called to carry, called to a mission in life? They are, carrying a visionary, like this big, expansive nervous system that says there's a lot more for you in this world, and you've been playing it small, right? Psychologically speaking, not all addictive patterns begin with indulgence, right? Just starting to drink or do drugs, right? A lot of them begin with suppression. Research in behavioral psychology has consistently shown that attempts to suppress thoughts or emotions, right? The kind of chaotic thoughts or even the emotions, the overwhelming emotions, will often have somebody have these emotions and thoughts rebound stronger, right? We try to suppress them and they keep coming back bigger and bigger and bigger. So the more we try not to want something, the more energy we're giving it. So this had me kind of exploring like what happens when someone has a deep longing not just for sobriety, right? They don't want to just get sober or step into recovery or let go of the things from their past, but they actually have this desire to make an impact in the world, a desire to like unleash their creativity on a regular basis, the desire to step into a place of spiritual authority, the desire to like know and understand what wealth truly means in life, the desire to have sacred partnership, right? What happens? What happens when this ambition is confused with ego? I believe some recovery spaces don't always understand or know what to do with these highly motivated, spiritually driven people, right? And when something isn't understood, it can be judged or subtly shamed, especially if it doesn't look like it's conforming to the program or working the steps as prescribed. I want to be really clear about this, though. I'm not talking again about impulse. I'm not talking about compulsion. I'm not talking about the trauma driven, actions that we take, like the quick triggered responses. I'm not even talking about trying to manipulate somebody else's will, right? Early in recovery, the distrust of impulse is wise. Your nervous system has been conditioned to chase dopamine spikes. Your urges are going to be distorted. And science even shows. It shows that repeated substance use rewires our reward pathways. So your brain, in and of itself, has learned how to immediately look for relief over a long term alignment. That is the path to compulsion. That is addiction, right? Sacred desire, though, is different. It unfolds slowly, right? It's not frantic. It's not demanding that we respond to it right now and immediately. It doesn't collapse your autonomy, it expands your sovereignty, both yours as well as others. There's a Japanese concept called ikigai, a reason for being. It lives at this intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, as well as what can sustain you materialistically. So when desire aligns with that intersection, right? It's not a narcissistic ambition, it's purpose. And for spiritually inclined people, desire often feels like a pull towards alignment, a steady knowing, a sense that you're meant to be somewhere, do something, contribute something specific, make a difference in the world and impact. But if you haven't ever been taught that it's okay to desire to be visible, right? If you've been taught that wanting visibility is pride, if you've been taught that wanting wealth makes you greedy, if you've been taught that wanting recognition for what you do is a sign that your ego is showing, you will shrink yourself. And when you shrink yourself long enough, your nervous system does not calm down. It tightens, it constricts. It will make you uncomfortable. For me personally, when I was drinking, I thought I wanted alcohol, right? I loved beer. I loved anything free that I could get my hands on. But what I was really looking for was permission. I wanted permission to be loud when I wanted to be. I wanted permission to be strange and weird. I wanted permission to set a boundary with someone that was making me uncomfortable or making me feel unsafe. I wanted permission to choose myself, permission to feel confident. And most of all, I wanted permission to connect. Addiction research consistently shows that isolation and a lack of meaningful connection, right? Meaningful connection are major drivers of substance misuse. Human beings are wired to belong. And when intimacy in and of itself is absent or unsafe, we will often reach for substitutes. Alcohol gave me a counterfeit intimacy. It gave me belonging in a room filled with other drunks, with other addicts, with other folks that were trying to numb from the trauma that they had experienced in their life. It also gave me a temporary relief of all of the shoulds that I had piled on myself, right? I should, you know, go get a better job. I should make a lot of money. I should get married. I should have my house this way. All of these shoulds, like these prescribed notions of what life should be like. And it gave me a version of confidence, usually after about drink number three, that I hadn't learned yet how to access sober. The real currency, though, I've learned was vulnerability, not alcohol. It was authentic connection. It was me being my own true sovereign self. Addiction was never excessive desire, it was distorted. And distortion thrives in shame. Psychologically, what we repress does not disappear. I don't care how much time and energy you put on trying to pretend like something doesn't exist, like you don't have a desire, right? It will go underground. Carl Jung wrote extensively about the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we reject or disown, right? And desires are a piece of them. Modern trauma research even echoes this, that suppressed emotions do not dissolve. So, suppressed desires do not dissolve. They are going to manifest through symptoms, tension, stress, and behavior. Neurologically speaking, chronic suppression activates the stress response. The body does not like to be in that state. So, if you are living out of alignment with your deeper longings, with your deeper desires, with the things that truly you know you're being called to, your nervous system is going to register it as a threat or a deprivation. And guess what? Substances and compulsions provide a quick regulation. They artificially soothe what you're unwilling to confront. Spiritually, if you believe that desire can function spiritually, If you believe that desire can function as a compass towards your ikigai, towards your reason for being, then ignoring that compass will create friction and distress. And for all of us folks that are spiritually wired, that friction is going to become restlessness, right? And that restlessness is going to become resentment because we can't go towards what we desire. And that resentment becomes justification. And that justification can become a relapse. It's might not be true for everyone in recovery, but I will tell you that for us witches, for us creatives, for us queer folks, for us mystics, for us spiritually ambitious people, suppressing a desire, right? A desire, especially as it's aligned with an intention to take us towards our life's purpose, can become a risk factor. In 2021, I created what I now call the alchemy of desire. And I ask myself, without performance or shame, what do I actually want? And one of the hardest things that I had to admit was that I wanted to be seen, not for applause or for my ego, right? But because I wanted the work that I was doing, the work that I engaged with on a daily basis to matter, right? If I was going to be spending 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week working on something, I wanted it to mean something in this world, right? I wanted to have influence because I truly thought that the path that I was on had a story that could be shared and rippled through the world. I wanted to continue to lead. I had done this for a really long time, and for a moment I didn't think that that's what I wanted anymore, but I do love to lead. I desire to be able to lead because I walk arm in arm with someone, not in front of them. At the end of the day, I just wanted to be recognized for something that genuinely served humans. And for most of my life, I had positioned myself as the producer behind the scenes, right? It felt safer not to be visible. And I had confused this shrinking with humility. Hmm. And I'll admit that when I stepped into sobriety the first time, it did shrink my life, right? I found that that continued to happen, but it was supposed to. Early recovery requires us to shed what is sick. But that contraction was never meant to be permanent. My nervous system was able to stabilize, which is really important because that was needed so I could expand. As I stopped shaming my desire, my life did just that. It began to expand. It began to change. It began to shift. I could literally hear timelines shifting. And I'll tell you a little bit of something personal, right? My partnership. In 2021, shortly after I wrote my story of what I truly desired, one of the things on that was that I was in a really beautiful relationship. And so I created a spell and I cast it and I set the intention. In 5 years, this coming summer, after a childhood filled with abuse, after a marriage filled with emotional abuse, after decades of believing that I was unlovable, when I'd finally had enough to stop and I'd healed enough to stop suppressing my longing for safety, suppressing my desire. Like I actually felt and leaned into my desire for reciprocal love. I started to make different choices. I tolerated less. My standards and expectations were higher, and the world began to align things differently for me. My desire for this partner became my guidance. And I feel blessed to say that I found him. You see, in magic, it is desire that is our fuel, right? We have this intention, And then the desire and the emotion behind that intention becomes the fuel, right? Intention without this emotional investment, intention without desire has less impact. And neuroscience even shows, right? Even if we go into the the scientific world, neuroscience shows that emotionally charged intention can strengthen our memory, our focus, and our behavioral follow through, right? In other words, desire increases commitment. If you're suppressing your longing, your spell work is going to feel dull. And let's be real, if you're suppressing your desires, your life's going to feel dull. We're not here in this world and in this life to abstain. We are here to transmute. I'm going to tell you right now that wealth is not inherently evil. Sacred partnership, like holding out for the person who you truly desire to be a partner with, is not selfish, right? Stepping out of a relationship that isn't is not selfish. Creative leadership, like stepping into is not believing you should be in a leadership role is not ego. Being an individual that shares their wisdom and knowledge and believes that it should be followed is not pride. Pleasure is not corruption. For all of us that are spiritually wired, suppressing these longings and these desires does not make us humble. Again, it makes us restless. And restless witches, my dear friends, if they do not know how to work with their fire, with their desire, with their passions, they're going to burn themselves down. Your longing is not a flaw. I want you to see it as a compass. But like any compass, it does not guide you until you know and understand how to interpret it. And that skill is built through our healing, our recovery, our regulation of our nervous systems, having discernment, our connection with the divine, and trusting our guides, and the emotional maturity to be patient. Early recovery teaches you to distrust impulse, and mature recovery teaches you how to trust aligned desire. If this is hitting for you, if you're getting a whisper that is just saying yes, don't silence it. Be honest. Our addiction was never born from desire, it was born from shaming that desire. I'd be very honored to have you work with us in the Recovery Coven as you navigate this recovery and what it means to have these desires. You can always find us at soberwitch.life, everything that we've got available. And until next time, my dear friends, much love and desire to be a part of your journey. I'm Sunshine, pink haired sober witch. Until next time.